Hey boys and girls, I'm really excited to be able to be back with you to continue in our series on the 7 I am statements of Jesus. And if you can believe it, we are actually on the 5th statement, our 5th week. But before I talk to you about what the 5th amazing statement is that Jesus made about himself, I want to review the first 4, just to make sure we haven't forgotten. All right, let's start at week number 1. The very first week we looked at this statement where Jesus said, I am the bread of life. Week number 2, we looked at this one. I am the light of the world. Week number 3, we looked at this one where he said, I am the door of the sheepfold. And last week, week number 4, he said, I am the good shepherd. So those are the first 4 I am statements of Jesus. And all of these statements pointed to one amazing truth about Jesus. So remember this, with each one of these I am statements, he is telling us, he's telling the people that we're looking at in the Gospel of John, he's telling them that he's not like anyone else. He is God. And this week's statement is a big one. But before I talk to you about that, I want to lead us into this week's statement with a question. Okay, here's the question for you. Have any of you ever had something sad happen to you? I think we could all answer yes. We've all had something sad happen to us. And as you get older, you're going to experience a lot of things in your life. And a lot of those things are going to be amazing. You have a lot of things to look forward to. But you're also going to experience some sad things as you continue to grow and get older. It's a part of our lives. Now, among the saddest things that we will ever experience is the death of someone that we love. Death is a part of our experience on this planet, our experience as human beings. And the Bible helps us to make sense of death. The Bible helps us to understand that death is real. It helps us to understand why death happens, what we should think about death, and it helps us to understand how God feels about death. And you might be wondering, Nathan, why on earth are you talking to me about death? I don't want to talk about this. Well, the next I am statement, today's I am statement, Jesus deals directly with this topic of death. But the statement and the story is not one that is going to leave you feeling sad. So don't worry about that. Before I tell you what the statement is, I've really been milking this and making this take a long time. But before I tell you what it is that Jesus says, I want to tell you the story to help you know why he said it. And to do that, I'm going to tell you a story from John chapter 11, beginning at verse 1 all the way through verse 44. So let's look at that story. This story begins when a messenger comes to Jesus and tells him that his friend Lazarus was very sick. Now, Jesus knew Lazarus really well, and he knew Lazarus' sisters as well, Mary and Martha. He had stayed at their house before. Now, Lazarus lived a few days away. But instead of Jesus getting up and going right away to heal him, he decided to stay where he was for 2 more days. So 2 days later, he said to his disciples, let's go and check on Lazarus. They made the journey, and as they got close to Bethany, which is the name of the town that Lazarus lived, Martha heard that Jesus was coming, and she came out to him. Martha was terribly sad, because while Jesus was away, Lazarus died. And she said to him, Lord, if you would have been here, my brother wouldn't have died. And Jesus looked at her, and he said, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me, even if he dies, he will live. So Martha rushed back and grabbed her sister Mary and brought her out to see Jesus. And Jesus looked at all of the people, Mary and Martha and their friends, and they were all crying. And Jesus was deeply moved with compassion, and he cried. Then he said,
"Where is Lazarus?" So they took Jesus to the tomb. He stood outside of the tomb and he said, "Take away the stone from the entrance." Well, nobody wanted to do that. He had been in the tomb for 4 days. But Jesus said, "Roll away the stone." And they rolled it away. Then Jesus did something amazing. He commanded in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." And Lazarus came out. His hands and his feet were wrapped in his grave clothes. And Jesus said, "Take his grave clothes off of him." And they did. Everyone was amazed. And many of the people who had come to cry with Mary and Martha saw what Jesus did, and they believed in him.
Isn't that an amazing story? I told you that it wasn't going to leave you feeling sad at the end. So, I want to read, at this point, finally, after all of the build-up, I want to read the I am statement to you that was actually in the story. It is found in John 11, verse 25, and it says this: Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me, even if he dies, will live." That's the statement. I am the resurrection and the life. I want to talk about just 2 things with you to help us understand what Jesus is saying in this statement. Here's the first one. Jesus is the source of hope. He is the source of hope. Think about this. Jesus takes the worst possible thing and he turns it into something good, something amazing. In order for there to be a resurrection, there first has to be death. There needs to be that awful thing happen. That thing that people are afraid of, that hurts them. And I think that if we had it our way, no one would ever die. Sounds about right, doesn't it? If we had it our way, nothing bad would ever happen to us at all. But as much as we hate sadness, God uses it to do amazing things. And Jesus shows us this in this story and in this statement. Look at what he says in John 11, verse 4. Just a few verses before, he helps us to make sense of how he's preparing to use it. He says, when Jesus heard that Lazarus was sick, he said, "This sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it." So he was saying this story is not going to end in death. That's not the end of this situation. Isn't that the way that we normally feel about death? It's the end, right? It seems so final. Nothing good can come from this. But Jesus was saying this bad situation, sickness and death, is actually something that I'm going to use, and I'm going to turn it around, and I'm going to turn it into an amazing thing. How? How is he going to do that? He's going to do it by raising Lazarus to life. Resurrection. Now there's one more thing that he did besides proving his power over death and giving hope. And it's really important that we get this. Jesus shows us how God feels about our suffering. Do you guys know what the shortest verse in the Bible is? A little piece of Bible trivia for you. The shortest verse in the Bible is found in John 11, verse 25. It says, Jesus wept. Jesus wept. Jesus cried. And he wasn't really crying for Lazarus, was he? Because he knew he was going to raise him from the dead. But he was crying because he looked around and he saw Mary and he saw Martha and he saw the people who were so sad, and he had compassion for them and he cried for them. Jesus has compassion for us in our sadness. So we know that. When we're hurting, when we're sad, we know that God cares and is ready and willing to turn our sadness into something good. He gives us hope. The second point is that Jesus is the source of life. So point number 1, Jesus is the source of hope. The second, Jesus is the source of life. Now, I was just looking through this old photo album of me when I was a kid. And there are some funny pictures in here, but there are also some pictures of people who are no longer living. And nothing seems quite so final to us as death. And yet, Jesus proved that not even death could stop him. Remember in the story when Jesus was coming close to the town and Martha came out to meet him? She said, "Lord, if only you had been here sooner, you could have healed him." So Martha did have faith in Jesus. She believed that he had power over sickness, but I think she kind of believed that's where his power ended. It's kind of the same with us. We have faith in Jesus. We believe that he loves us. We believe that he cares about us and he can help us. But do we believe that Jesus is capable of doing whatever he wants? Here is what this story and this statement reminds me about Jesus. Reminds me that he can handle any situation. If Jesus can take a man who has been dead for 4 days and bring him back to life, then he can handle all of my hard situations, and I can trust him. As I read this story, I can't help but think about another time that Jesus defeated death. There was another resurrection. Can you think of what I'm thinking? I think you can. I'm talking about the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. So think about this. Jesus was dead. He was buried. He was now in a tomb with a stone in front of it. It seemed like all hope was lost. His followers were sad. They were afraid. Then he rose again. But Jesus' resurrection story is different. This time, when Jesus rose again, he rose again to never die again. He's still alive today. That's not what could be said for Lazarus. Jesus raised him from the dead, and then years later, he died again. But not Jesus. He is still alive today. And here's the amazing thing for us, that if we believe in Jesus, we will never have to fear death, because death is not the end for us. We will live forever with him. I want to close with the words of Jesus that he spoke to Martha in John 11:26. They're amazingly encouraging words for us too. He said this, "And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die." Do you believe this? All right, we're at the end, so I've got some questions for you. Remind you, again, if you want to grab a hold of some of your family, bring them around, ask your parents maybe to help you with some of these questions and answers. I think it would be a good time for you guys. So, question number 1. When you think about your own life, what are some hard things that you can trust Jesus with this week? Remember that Jesus showed us that he is the source of hope and he is the source of life. So because of that, he can overcome anything. And he sometimes, and oftentimes, even takes hard, sad things and makes something good out of them. So we can really trust Jesus with whatever is going on in our lives. Question number 2. Read 1 Corinthians 15, 20, 21, and 22. And here's the question. How does Jesus' resurrection affect us? Now in these verses, it talks about Jesus as the first fruits. It's not a term that we use very often today, but the idea is this. He is the very first one, and it affects everyone else who comes after him. So the idea is that everyone who believes in Jesus will also have eternal life. They will also be raised from the dead for everlasting life, right? And the last question. The last question I have for you is the question that Jesus asked Martha. So I'm going to read it one more time from John 11:26. It says, "Whoever lives and believes in me shall never die." Now here's the question. Do you believe this? I think at this point, if you've been with us for a while through these videos, and if you've been in Compass Kids or Discovery Land, you kind of have this understanding that when we talk about all that Jesus has done, we're telling you this to help bring you to the place of understanding that you can trust in Jesus, that He is the one who is deserving of your faith and your trust. So you can learn all about Jesus and know all kinds of things about Him, but the real important question is, do you believe in Him? Do you place your faith and your trust in Him? That's the heartbeat of the gospel, why we share it with you. And I'm really glad that I got a chance to talk to you today about how Jesus is the resurrection and the life. So once again, I look forward to seeing you again next week, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.